What's up, everybody? Welcome to Make Things Tiny. My name is Mick, and today I get to sit down with Alexis. Alexis is the creator of This Tiny Journey here on YouTube and also on Instagram. Get to talk to them about their experience living in a tiny house. They used to live in a tiny house for a little while, and now they live in a mobile home. So they're going to share a little bit about their experience. You're going to hear their thoughts. I get to pick their brain a bit, and hopefully, it's all really helpful information for all of you. So, without saying too much more, let's jump right into the conversation. All right. Well, I'm here today with Alexis. Thank you so much again for being willing to be on the channel. Super excited to talk to you. Alexis is a former tiny house dweller, and now you're renovating a mobile home. All really exciting stuff. So yeah, if you could just take a second and just talk a little bit about sort of like who you are and how you got started with tiny houses, we can just go from there.
Totally. So I'm Alexis. On the internet, on This Tiny Journey, because I thought that was a very clever name 5 years ago.
It is. I love
And
it.
thank you. It took me forever. But I started living tiny in 2018, I want to say, because my rent was going up and my sister was moving out. So I was like, I'll just get a tiny house. And then my sister got a tiny house. And so then we ended up just living tiny together because it was cheaper than rent.
Yeah. No, I think that's
So
a good point that you bring up too with the rent, because like the housing market's just getting worse and worse, like you think from, it was really expensive in 2018 and now it's even more expensive. Like I don't know where you're located, but I'm in San Diego, which is the most expensive city in the country now, and average rent's like 2 grand. I know for the country it's like 1,400 a month. But in general it's just really expensive to find a place. So yeah, I think that tiny houses are a really great affordable housing option, and just they're fun. It's just like a fun, creative thing to get to do. So that's really cool that your sister got a tiny house too.
yeah, she still lives in hers. Um, but I live out in the middle of nowhere. I'm in the Florida countryside
Okay.
because I want it to be cheap and peace and quiet. And I got that, but it's
Mhm.
also very boring. But
Yeah. Where did you get your tiny house from? Like what was it like a larger one? Like was it like did it have lofts? Like what was the kind of setup and where'd you get it from?
oh yeah, so I got them custom made. It was 26 long and 8.5 wide
Mhm.
through Cornerstone Tiny Homes in Florida. I
Okay.
don't know if they do tiny homes anymore, but I know that they're doing like small, tiny houses on foundation, but mine's on wheels.
Okay.
And I had a double loft,
Cool.
so it was pretty big for me when I needed it at the time. And it is mobile, but since it's so large and it's so heavy, I didn't move it much because the more you move it, the more wear and tear you put on a house.
Yep.
So we were stationed in a tiny house community, but now I have it moved to my property now, so it's out there, and like my boyfriend's living in it now because
Okay.
he was just sitting there.
That's cool. You still have it. What was the tiny house community like? Like, what was that? Because I know there's a lot of options. Like, you can put it in an RV park, you can put it in your backyard or a family member's backyard, but you opted for the tiny house community, and I don't feel like there's a lot of them around in the U.S. in general. So, what was that like?
Um, at first it was very fun. Then it was not fun
Okay.
because we just the lifestyle that was promised to us by the person that owns it isn't and what ended up happening.
Okay.
And it was just like a bunch of stuff. But I feel like it can be fun if you find like a good group of people. But after the beginning, it just wasn't a good group of people. It was kind of just like the same type of people,
Hmm.
a little out of touch with reality, and just like different age groups. So there wasn't really anything to connect with.
Okay.
Um, but I don't have I lived in an RV park? No, I never lived in an RV park, so I can't speak on that. But I have lived on like someone else's property. That was a little bit more fun, but a lot more risky because when it's someone else's property, anybody else can move on.
Okay.
Um, a lot less restrictions than when you're in like a tiny house community.
Hmm.
But it was fun.
I think that makes sense. I feel like what you said about like if would make more sense, or maybe it'd be easier if you knew the people living in the community and sort of like you knew they were going to stay there and it was just like a solid group of people. I feel like hopefully like over time more people can get on the tiny house sort of like movement and like create more communities where you know the people, so it's not like you're moving into a place with a bunch of random people, because that's kind of like something that Is something I've thought about because I want to buy a tiny house and like renovate it one day too. And like just thinking like where you're gonna put it and if you live in it, like what that's gonna look like. I know in this area where I'm at in Southern California, it's not really feasible. It's really dense and there's not even a lot of RV parks out here and they're very, very small and kind of cramped. So you'd have to move like pretty far out, outside of the city to sort of have something like that. So that it makes sense that you're further out too.
Yeah, it's and like the zoning laws are
Mhm.
so complicated and there's so many of them. It's really hard to find parking for a tiny house.
Okay.
Um, and even if you have your own land, like most people don't know, you can't just park your tiny house on your land legally in most counties. It's if it's on wheels at least, it's not legal. But yeah, it's difficult.
Would you
I
say
don't miss
those were kind of like the main challenges you experienced was just like the community itself, or was there any sort of challenges around just like living in a tiny house too?
No, it was mostly just the community, like the location, I think is what made it like not so fun. Tiny living is pretty well, it was easy for me because I got rid of all my stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was also raising a toddler at the same time. So as she got older, it started
Yeah.
to get harder. And I
Okay.
know that there's people that do it, but not me. My mental health cannot take it. I was
Yeah.
like, you need a room. I can't deal with this. But if you're a single person, it's pretty simple. My sister does it super easy, and she's probably gonna be doing it for the next year or two, I think.
Hmm. Was it
And
like a
it's
pretty decent price? Like, did you do any of the work yourself on the inside, or was it just like they built everything out and like it was pretty decent like pricing too? Because I know the range for them is so wide in terms of what you can spend, and now they're getting really expensive too. So I was just curious
oh
about
yeah,
that.
they're way expensive now.
Mhm.
So I paid 75,000 for mine, and they
Okay.
did everything, and I had upgrades. So the base price at the time for a 26 foot was
Mhm.
65, which
It's a
was
great price.
yeah, at the time was a great price.
Yeah.
Don't tell people on the internet that though; they were like up in arms.
No, I mean you
Um,
really can't get something custom built for that
no,
price point anymore. You're gonna spend 100K easily.
that's what I try to tell people. I'm like, you don't understand that it's an investment. It's expensive, but because I was able to get that, it helped me like get this house now and really set me up because my expenses were only my living house expenses was only 500 a month for
Okay.
rent, food, not food, rent, electricity, what's the thing called? Water,
Yep.
sewage. It was all like included, and it started out as 450, and then eventually went up to 500.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, and my sister paid about 80 because she had some other custom stuff in hers, and they're very different.
Hmm.
But yeah, now you're definitely gonna pay at least 6K for 26 feet, unless you
Yeah.
like buy secondhand.
Hmm. Yeah. No, it's been really interesting to see like how it's changed. I mean, it's still more affordable than buying a house, right? And your monthly payments, like even if you finance it, it's still gonna be a lot easier than if you buy like a home. Because I think right now the median home price in the US is like 400K. So it's a lot, and that's just like that's in the entire country. So it's not like just the coast is expensive now. Like I grew up in the Midwest, and like just the whole entire country is just really pricey. So I think that's still a great deal to be able to have your own home that you can sort of like make your own and customize it. So that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I really haven't seen anything in that 70K price range unless it is like used. Um, so
It's
or it's
the
just like the
landscape.
shell, like there's nothing in it. It's not like
Yeah, the
yeah.
landscape has definitely changed a lot since like COVID and everybody
Hmm.
wanting to live tiny. So I'm grateful that I got to do it beforehand.
Hmm.
Um, oh, but yeah, the housing prices, it's a mess. It's a mess. But there needs to be more like loan options for tiny houses. I
Yeah.
think that's what keeps a
Yep.
lot of people out of it at the moment, which sucks because
Hmm.
like they're great.
Yeah, and the loan options they're kind of high too, like with the interest rates. Like the interest rates for some of them, I was looking at one is like 8.5%. They can be like well over like seven, or they can be like seven, 8 or 9 because they're private loans, so they can sort of set the interest rate differently than for like a public loan or like a loan for a house. So you are going to pay on the interest rate, but it still does end up being like, less than $1,000 a month, which is pretty good for your housing payment. Is that what made you sort of go tiny, was the housing market and just wanting to have like a cheaper place?
Yes, that and I thought I was going to move more because I was in grad school. I didn't really have any like thing tying me down to. I was in Tampa,
Mm-hmm.
and so I wanted to like have this thing where I can move it with me because I'm like the world's worst mover. I hate moving and I hate packing.
Yep,
That
that's
was
fair.
my goal. Innocent 21-year-old Alexis. Then I got knocked up, so that never happened. But it was still good to like have, and yeah, it was wait stupid cheap. I loved it. I miss
What
it.
was
I
that
miss
like
everything.
with like sort of like raising your kid? You said you like in the tiny house was like initially no big deal because they're so small that they don't really like think about it, or you can like they don't need their own space when they're so tiny themselves.
Yes, that's exactly how it was. Like as a newborn, it was easy because I was like, she ain't going nowhere.
Hmm.
But then she started like walking, and it was still fine because I created like a little outdoor patio for her, and so that was easy. But then she wanted like more stuff. She wanted more toys, and I thought I was gonna be that like anti-toy mom.
Hmm.
But when you're a single mom and you only have one kid, you have to entertain them somehow. And
Yep.
she couldn't like I couldn't be the one entertaining her all the time. I was working and going to school. So then she needed toys, and then I had pets, and so then it was just like I can't do this. I need more space, and I didn't want to go like I'm in 1,100 square feet now, and the tiny was like maybe 400 ish if you included both lofts, but without the loft,
Hmm.
it was like two something. And even this is like really big for me right now, coming from that. But some people do it with kids fine,
Yeah.
not me.
Yeah. And pets too, like, because you can't really control what your pets do. Like, I have two cats, and like, I'm trying to imagine them in a tiny house. I think they would be kind of awful. They're awful in my apartment, and it's not that small. Like, they just, I feel like sometimes they need a floor apart just to separate from themselves because they need space, and then I need space from them.
It's a
So like,
lot.
you know, it's a lot. Was
It's
what is that sort of like what prompted the move to the mobile home? Because like, now, how long ago did you? Like how long did you stay in the tiny house and like when did you transition out of it? Like what was that like?
Yeah, so I was in tiny house for 5 years.
Oh wow, okay.
So
That's a long time.
yeah, it was a long time for me. Boss was 4 when we moved out, and my one of my neighbors who she had moved, she was the first person in the tiny house community because it was when me and my sister moved here. It was only like a couple months,
Hmm.
like it only been up for a couple months. She moved, and I was like, well, and she was like the last sane person there. So I was like, well, if she's gone, I need to get the ball rolling. So then I lost my train of thought. Hold on. I'm so sorry. I do this a lot. Okay. She
No problem.
moved 5 years. Okay. So then I moved in March of last year. So I'm coming up on a year in this
Okay.
house.
Cool.
And we've been here, yeah, a year, Alexis, I think. And the transition was hard at first because I went from a house that I designed and I moved in and everything was ready and it was like good to go to like this 20-year-old house in the middle of nowhere, um, green carpet from 1999. It was just like a whole mess. And like the problems that happen in a tiny house are like a smaller. Like if my AC
Yep.
went, it was just a split unit. In this house, it's like thousands of
Yeah.
dollars to fix
Yeah.
stuff. I'm like,
Yeah.
why did I do this? But I know why I did it. And then like now I've got more pets, so
Oh wow, cool. Well, you have more space for them, so that makes sense.
that's the problem. Now I got more space. Now I keep getting more stuff,
Hmm.
but I don't like. Some days I miss the freedom of the tiny house.
Hmm.
Like I could quit my job whenever I wanted. I could just because my expenses were so low. But I like the space that it affords me and my daughter. This house does, and watching her grow up into it and like kind of get to be her own person without
Hmm.
us being like on top of each other. So that's fun.
I think that makes sense. So I think you're kind of talking about like a really important thing to think about. I feel like a lot of people are thinking about because mobile homes are becoming more popular, like mobile homes, manufactured home, that space. Like out here, you can get a brand new one for like $400,000. So they're not cheap. Like they're coming from like, builders and they're like high end, like luxury finishes inside of them. And like I've seen ones where they're like 4 bedrooms and 3 baths and like, you know, a lot of square footage too. So I feel like that's sort of like in the middle of the road when like people are thinking about affordable housing solutions too, because again, that is some you still own it, like it's yours. And you can sort of like sell it or you can move it if you want to. But it's not the same as having like a tiny house, which is going to be cheaper, but like, it's going to be smaller. Like, was it like a huge jump? Like you talked about the like some of the finances, like the difference, was it a huge jump? Like, was it a lot more expensive than the tiny house, or was it still kind of manageable compared to like buying a house?
Um, I can just give you the numbers because I'm a very transparent person.
Okay, if
So
you're
living
okay with that,
especially,
then that's awesome.
I don't care. So in terms of just like living, the tiny house was 500 for the rent,
Mhm,
water, sewage, all this stuff. I moved out to the country and I wanted to be on my own well and septic on purpose because I don't want to pay for that. So I don't have to
mhm,
pay for that. Yay. And my mortgage is 1387 because I got like such an old house. When I
mhm.
was in the middle of nowhere, like my town only has 200 people in it,
Okay.
but I did that on purpose. But I wanted more land. I'm on like zero point 0.6 acres now. That was
Yeah.
what was important to me.
Yeah.
And then before my monthly expenses was like $1,300 a month. It was
Okay.
fantastic, which is why I
Wow,
was
I
able
can't
to
even
get
imagine that. Like, I feel like that people, I
this.
feel like people are gonna watch this video and they're gonna be like, "What are you talking about? Like, how did you even do that?" Because that sounds like you could work like you can work a lot of different types of jobs with that sort of like all in, and like you're saying, you don't have to be attached to any of them, or you could do like a couple of side hustles that are like really like more low maintenance and like sort of like piece together that amount a month. So that, I mean, that's phenomenal.
That's what I would do. I'd like work really hard a couple months and then I'd quit and then I would like just like sit at home
Yeah.
for a couple months. But I also like I had a paid off car. Those from 2007. Um, so and then I didn't have any credit card debt because I paid it off.
Hmm.
Well, so my mom died. I feel like I have to preface. My mom died and she left me money, which is how I was able to get the tiny house.
Hmm.
So that was I hate calling it a privilege, but it is a privilege.
It
But
is, yeah.
and that she died.
But it's a bittersweet one though. So, it's like first and
Yeah,
foremost, I'm sorry for your loss. Like losing a parent, that can't be, that can't be easy. But then again, like you are sort of like gifted something that is able to like allow you to sort of like breathe a bit and like get a
yeah,
little bit of relief. So like I think it's great. I don't know. I think it depends on the people's background too. I think when you like come from money and then you get more money through through like an inheritance or a death, it's different. Like sort of like it's like a sliding scale to privilege, I think, when we're having these conversations. So
mhm,
it's not the same, as if you were just like grow up rich and then you get money as opposed to like kind of like getting a break. And I don't know if I see catching a break as a privilege necessarily in the same way.
that's true. But I it has been easier for me than like other people, so
Hmm.
I won't like try to discount that.
Sure.
But that is why my expenses were like so low. And again, we lived in the middle of nowhere in
Yeah.
Florida, so that helped.
Yeah.
So my mortgage now is 1387, and all in all expenses is probably comes up to like 2 or 3 grand a month now. And
Hmm.
because of that, I'm tied to like my job, which I'm
For
making a lot
sure.
more than when I was in the tiny house, which has been a very stressful transition for me because
Mhm.
like I was so used to that freedom of like if I can't mentally do this, I can take a break. There
Yep.
ain't no breaks for your girl now. I just have to work. Because if I don't work, these bills don't get paid. And so that's something I'm trying to like reason with. So I don't like this whole mortgage thing. They painted this homeownership picture as like, you gotta do it the American dream. I'm hating it. I'm not gonna lie, I'm hating it. But I love my house. I hate the rest of it.
Yeah. What about it do you feel like is the part that's like kind of different than what the picture was kind of painted for you? Because like this is something I think about a lot. Like I've been teaching on things that are related to this for like 10 years. I'm a professor. I've been a professor for 10 years. And like this is something I've talked a lot about in a lot of my classes. It's something I think about all the time, just kind of the difference between what we're told we should be sort of striving for and what's going to make us feel, secure and what actually does. So when you think about people going tiny, they're doing kind of like the opposite of what the American dream says. The American dream
Mhm.
says to like get one job, work it till you die, buy a very large house that's kind of bigger than what you need, and then just, pay that off until you die. Like go to school, get a ton of debt that you have to pay off until you die. Like it's kind of, I'm being like a little bit dramatic, kind of,
That's it
but like
though.
that is kind of it versus like, which is why I think the tiny house movement has stayed so small, is that it really pushes up against what people think is like the idea of being, American and being like hardworking and being free. It's not just like buying a 300 square foot box, moving to a patch of land, having your own well, your own like like putting a bunch of solar panels all around your place and then just like not talking to anybody, like just being completely isolated and being happy. Being a happy
Yeah.
hermit on a patch of land in the middle of nowhere is just so far from what we're taught. So I feel like it makes sense that you're kind of grappling with it because now you've experienced both.
Mhm.
So that makes a lot of sense. What do you think was the difference? Like the big difference, like kind of like mortgage isn't the like I guess, glamorous as they make us think it is.
Yeah, I think they maybe because the older generations, like the job, maybe the job markets were different or the jobs were different.
Mhm,
But I like the stress that comes with making sure that you always have a job that you make enough at to be able to pay off your mortgage.
mhm,
I wasn't ready for that like type of stress or like
mhm,
insurance, all that stuff that goes up. Because the tiny house insurance was easy. Like I was less than $1,000 a year.
mhm.
But I think it's just more like the stress. And like my neighbors are all really, really old because I live in Villanova in this tiny
Mhm.
town. So,
Yep.
back when we were younger, I don't know about you, but like I lived on a cul-de-sac. So I was
Yep.
always outside.
Yep.
The parents were always outside. These people don't come outside.
Yeah.
They also just don't talk to me, but that's just another thing. And so I thought I was gonna get this break, right? Because I don't have to stress about someone coming and telling me I have to move my house or like, my landlady like kicking me off the land. Those were my biggest stressors. And now my stress is if I lose my job, me and my kid, like, where are we gonna live? Like, I lose my mortgage. I don't know
Yep.
anything about bankruptcy. What? How do you foreclosure? Like that shit. I'm sorry. That
Yeah.
stresses me out.
Yeah.
And I was talking to my boyfriend the other night. I was like, I like that I got to experience this, but I definitely my next step is a smaller home where a smaller mortgage, not as tiny as the tiny house,
Mhm.
but like I can't. It's 1,000 square feet. I think my total loan is like 189, and that's
Yeah.
very cheap.
Yeah, it is.
I can't do this. This is
Yeah.
stressing me out.
Yeah.
So this ain't the dream. I understand now when people like they stay apartment living or like I
Mhm.
wish I had the my mental health wasn't doing good in the tiny house simply because I just had the kid and all the pets.
Yeah.
Um, so I wish I could have stayed tiny, but that just wouldn't have worked. But I
Mhm.
definitely will not be getting a bigger house with a larger mortgage
Yeah.
ever in my life.
Mhm.
They can
No,
keep
that
that.
makes sense. That makes sense. It sounds stressful. I've been renting my whole life. So like I have a lot of goals. Like I want to buy a tiny house and renovate it. I want to start my own tiny house company. I do want to buy houses and own property. I'm a real estate agent now. I just got my license like last week. So I do want to do all of those things and it's super exciting, but it is really scary because like the more I feel like the biggest thing I learned when I was studying for my real estate exam and when I was studying for it, I was talking to my fiance, I was like, why don't people know this? Like everything I was reading felt like information all of us should have.
Mhm.
Because it's really scary. And when you go and you like, I go to like look at properties and like go to open houses and I talk to the people that are there trying to sell them too. And you learn about the interest rates and how much it costs and all and what people's mortgage is going to be. Like, talking to like a mortgage lender, like what your mortgage is. I think people don't realize like what your monthly payment is going to be all in. So like when you think about like rent is just rent. Like if they say you have to pay $1,500 a month, that's all you're paying. You might have to pay for utilities and then you have to like cable and all those things on your own. But when you buy a house, you buy a $500,000 house, you're out like, $3,500 a month all in potentially, right? Like your mortgage is not all you're paying. Like you're paying for your homeowner's insurance, your property taxes, your HOA, depending on where you're at. Like and that doesn't even cover like utilities. I remember growing up, like my parents had like a 2,800 square foot place, and the electricity bill, like the utilities were like a grand or more a month. So like those are things we don't think about, and I don't think we have a lot of jobs, like for like millennials and like Gen Z, like being younger. Like I'm a millennial, like the jobs that are available to us, regardless of our education level, are just not as secure as they were like 10, 15, 20 years ago. So like and also we don't I don't know if you like this, but we don't want to do a lot of the jobs. Like I don't like most of the jobs I see available. Like I'm leaving the one that I'm in. Like I don't want to be a professor anymore. Like I would just do this if I could for the rest of my life. Like I love meeting people and YouTube is really
Right?
exciting. Like this is what I want to do. I want to do content creation, but like it's tough. It's tough to get into. It's tough to be successful. I know you've been doing your YouTube channel for quite a while now. Like we just we see the life we want to have and then but it's like how do you get there is kind of like the big question now and so I appreciate you being so transparent about like just how much it sucks to have a mortgage. I don't think people talk about that.
I told my sister that. She was like, Alexis, it hasn't even been a year. And I'm like, I know. And imagine how many more I have. But totally random. The professor was my dream job. I wanted to be a professor so bad. And then I went for my master's and I was like, I'm sorry. I was like, Absolutely not. There's no way I can get a PhD because that was this is so mentally draining.
It's a lot.
So
Yeah, I did, and I went straight through. Like,
oh
I got my PhD when I was 29. So like I it was just school. That's all I knew. So I think it's a tough choice to make. I think I don't regret it because I feel like I don't ever have to go back to school again. Like I don't have to worry about that sort of thing. It gives you a lot of opportunities. Like I've worked from home for the past 5 years, which I really love. I teach online, which is really cool. So, it's easy to find like jobs here and there. But in terms of like job security, it's tough because the field has changed so much. So it's hard to get like full-time job that's paying the big bucks with the benefits. Like not a lot of professors have that anymore. So that's kind of what's changed, unless you're like really old.
yeah, for
That's
like
like
10
most
years.
things have kind of like died with the older generation had all these things where it's like they had one job that paid all their bill. I can't even imagine. They had one job that paid all of their bills and they owned their home and they had multiple cars and they could even pay a little
Don't
bit
you?
for their kids' education. I'm like, you guys are living in an alternate universe.
Right?
Like,
Like that is
like,
not the reality. Like I'm a data analyst right now. And am I good at it? Who knows? We'll get there. But it's like chat GPT, all this AI stuff comes
mm-hmm,
out and like
mm-hmm,
software is constantly changing. So I'm always like, I need to learn more and more and more. And like at what
hmm.
point do I feel secure in my job where I don't feel like
Yep,
I have to learn more before I'm like
yep,
replace I don't like this.
yeah.
Okay.
I do feel like we're constantly having to learn stuff to like make sure that our skills are on point because we are getting like you do get replaced by technology like all the time.
And it's
So
just
that
like
makes
that.
sense.
They'll
Hmm.
just like, bye, find a new job. And then like I have to make what I make now or else, lose the house. So but I try to think positive. I try to
Yeah.
be, Alexis, just.
But I think it's important. I think this is really important information for people to have because I do think that if you know nothing about tiny houses and you know nothing about, manufactured homes or mobile homes, or just the home buying process, you see things on social media and you think that everyone's just got like everything put together and it's like super clean and like tiny living's perfect and buying a house is like kind of stressful, but then you settle in and everything's perfect. And so I think it's important to have the conversations where you're being really honest about how hard it is. Especially since like so many people are still renting. Like I'm still renting and I'm learning about it because I'm in the industry, but there's a lot that we still don't know and unless you're actually like out there doing it, so that makes sense. So,
Oh yeah, I
yeah.
cried a bunch of times during the house buying process because I didn't know anything. I
Hmm.
just got a realtor reach out to me on Instagram, and I was like, "This is great," and she was so helpful. I loved her. I put in an offer on the second house I ever saw, and then it was just like one thing after it, like a bunch of things. Like, I just didn't know, but I had already signed, so you just kind of have to go with it. And then for the first month or two that I lived in the house, I cried every night because I was alone.
Hmm.
I didn't realize how like alone you felt in this like giant space. Didn't know anything to do. Things were breaking, and I was like, I don't know. I had to find there was no Wi-Fi out here when I got out here, so I had
Hmm.
to figure that out. And I was like, is this what is this what my parents went through? Is this what other people go through? They like sit in a blow up bed in their house because mattresses are freaking
Oh gosh,
expensive.
yeah.
Like what the
Yeah, they
heck?
are. Hmm.
And you're just like crying to sleep at night, or is it just me? But that's how it was. It was not fun.
Mattresses are really expensive. I think I remember that when I moved down here. Like I've only lived here for like a little over a year, and I remember going to IKEA, which is supposed to be a more reasonably priced place, but I feel like they upped their prices. Like
They
somebody
have.
please do some research on IKEA because I think they've definitely upped their prices. Because when I went there, their mattresses, like their cheapest mattress was like $400, like, and it felt cheap. So I was like, okay, I gotta spend a little bit more. So like to sell out $600 just to have like something comfortable to sleep on, and then you got to get like the box spring if you want it. You gotta buy all the stuff. Like yeah, furnishing a place is really hard.
I
Um,
didn't know that. I
because
furnished a
it's
tiny house.
stressful. Yeah, because you don't plan for that. Like I feel like when you go to buy a house, especially if you're a first time home buyer or like you're transitioning to like something small, like from something smaller to something bigger, you just like you get the money to buy the thing. You don't think like, oh, I have to have money to buy it and I have the money to furnish it. I have to money if something breaks. So it's just like, oh, I guess I just have to have like endless money. Just
That you're speaking to the choir. That was literally me. I was like, I spent all my money buying the house because you earnest deposit. You have to pay for the appraiser. You have to pay for the inspections. I didn't know that.
hmm.
Who knew that? Not me.
Hmm.
Closing costs, all this nonsense. And then so I got the house. no furniture because I live in a tiny house, and
Yep.
no, I had no coffee table, no nothing. And then like I've been out of AC for like 3 months because
Hmm.
I can't afford to fix that. But it's wintertime in Florida, so I'm just like
Oh, you're good.
I'm ignoring it for now. But it's starting to get hot again because we don't really have winter. Um, but I do think that more people, whether it's on TikTok, that's where I hang out, or Instagram, they just talked about like what it was like for them buying a house. But people that don't have money, like I'm all for seeing luxury lifestyle, but I didn't realize how unrealistic it was because I didn't have anything to compare it to.
Hmm.
Because my parents didn't tell me about the house buying process. My dad don't know nothing.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm blabbling now. Sorry, but yeah.
No, no, I think that's important. I think that no, that's a really good point because there is a difference when you have money or you have parents that have money versus when you don't. The whole experience of buying a home is very different based on like what your income level is at. And I think that what we see on social media is the luxury side of things. And like like living down here, like a lot of the houses are $1 million or more. So like when you think about what you have to make a year to be able to buy $1 million house, you're talking about having a family where you guys make like 300K combined or something like that, right? 300 or 250 or something like that. I think you have to make 200K a year to be able to afford a house down here. Like, so I think that's not the majority of the people in the United States. The majority of people make like, the average is like 75,000 and a lot of people make less than that. So that's just not, we're not getting realistic images at all of what it looks like to own a home and or even to rent a place. To get an Airbnb, I feel like when I see people's Airbnbs on social media, I'm like, there's no way that was $130 a night, which is the kind of money I would want to spend on Airbnb. I don't want to spend $500 a night or $1,000 a night on an Airbnb. That doesn't make any sense. So yeah, we're definitely not getting like, we're getting flooded with images of what like very rich people are experiencing. So I feel like it's going to be a shock for all of us when we go through the process.
Or people who bought their house pre-pandemic. Because me and my sister, when I first found out I was pregnant, I was like, okay, I can't live in a tiny house for much longer. That's not true, but that's what I thought. And four-bedroom houses in 2018 under 200K in my
Hmm.
area. It was beautiful.
Hmm.
This one cost me 189, and
Yeah.
it's built in 1999. Like
Oh wow,
they
yeah, that's
changed
almost 30
nothing.
years. Yeah, that's pretty high.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's pretty old.
they didn't change a single thing. He bought the property, put this house on it, and then that was that. And I was like, oh
Yeah.
well, he put in a dryer 7 years ago.
Oh
So
wow. Okay.
thank you, sir.
Do you feel like you'll, because I know a lot of like people are sort of interested in tiny houses because you can turn them into ADUs, you can put them on your property, you can rent them out, you can do like you can generate income with them. Do you think that since you have your tiny house still, you'll end up using it to like rent out and like make money that way, like passive income, or do you think you'll eventually like sell it?
Oh, I'll never sell it. It's paid off. I might as well keep
Okay.
the thing. In terms of renting, I don't know how legal it is because ADU laws are a bit different when your thing is on wheels,
Okay.
and tiny houses are technically RVs, and you can't live in an RV full time for more than like a couple months out of the year, I think. Um, but again, that depends on your zoning. But I did want to rent it out eventually. It's just kind of like how to do that because my daughter's still young and I don't have like I have a lot of land, but not like so much that it's not weird that like just random people are like coming and going at all times. So, but eventually I might rent it out or give it to my daughter when she's like a teenager or something.
Mm-hmm.
Let her have a little space, but it's paid off. So I always want to have it just in case something unfortunate happens. It's nothing to like pull up to an RV, location and find a job and pay
Yep.
expenses that way. That's like my backup plan.
Yeah. I think that's smart because I think that is something that, you just talked about. Like, you don't have when you buy a house, there is no other plan. You kind of get locked into the mortgage and it's like, what if something happens? So yeah, I think that's a really smart option to have because it's better than like your car or even an RV even. It's because it isn't like an RV in the same way. Like you don't feel like you're living in a car. So I think that makes sense too.
Oh yeah, I could talk all day about the difference between an RV and a tiny house, but people say it's classist. So, but they
Mhm.
are different. They're
I don't
built
think so.
very,
They're
very
different
different.
ththings. They're
They
not
are
the
very
same
different
thing.
things, but most people don't realize that like a tiny house on wheels is usually it's like a house on wheels. Like it's a whole wooden house. It's
Hmm.
18,000 pounds. Like that thing, it's not like plastic material. It's very different,
Hmm.
but and like very different than a schoolie.
Hmm.
So schoolies are also very fun, but hard to find parking sometimes. That's why I didn't go that route.
Hmm.
But
No, that makes
they're
sense.
getting better now.
They are, yeah. I think I'm glad they are. I don't know how I don't know the full extent of how popular things will get, but I think that, the more expensive stuff gets, at least for millennials and Gen Z, like at least for younger generations, we're starting to think like, does it make sense to buy a huge house or like buy a house, period? And I know a lot of people like to move around, like they don't want to be stuck in one place. Like if you work from home, as more and more people go into like content creation and social media route, like if you're a YouTuber, you don't have to live in the same place. Like you just have to have a decent internet connection and you can live wherever you want. So I think that's something that people are thinking about too, is like maybe I don't want to be stuck in this one spot for the next 15 or 30 years. Especially if people aren't going to be going outside and people aren't talking to their neighbors. Like I don't like I try to because I'm pretty friendly, but like I've noticed that like people they don't want to talk to you like at all. They don't even want to make eye contact. So I think that changes things too.
They don't
Like
do
the
that.
neighborhood feel is dying, so that doesn't help.
Well, for me, I think so. Like I live in a predominantly like white area, so
Mhm.
some of my neighbors that like my boyfriend is white, they'll talk to him, but they won't talk to me. Which we're not gonna get into that. So
Mhm.
I think I just didn't pick a very good area to try to make like neighbors, and there's like a very big age difference.
Mhm.
But I was like raised in the South, so I want to stay in the South because I like Southern hospitality. Up north, people don't really, and I'm like, my family's in New York, they're from New York. They don't really like, be hi to your neighbor, and
Oh
that
no.
stresses me out
No. You
because I'd
shouldn't
be
make eye
hi to
contact with anybody.
everybody.
You shouldn't make eye contact with anybody in New York. I think I grew up in like in Michigan, and I remember like going downtown Detroit as a kid, and like I remember like one of the things I was taught is like don't look at people, like don't make eye contact
Yes.
for too long, because you don't want people to think that you're thinking something's wrong or something like that. So like I grew up very much like, even though I'm super friendly, like I'll chat with anybody. Like I tend to talk a lot to like the cashier at like PetSmart because I get really excited about my
Hi.
pets. But yeah, no, people are, yeah, even here, like I don't feel like people are super friendly, like super duper friendly, on like in California either. But I think it's just the country, like in general, becoming less friendly. Like I just don't think we trust each other as much as we used to. Like we're not a friendly bunch any as much as we used to be, but
Yeah,
it's okay.
individualism is coming up. But one thing I'll say about tiny living, in terms of movement, the bigger
Yeah.
your house is, the harder it is to move.
Hmm.
I just like to let people know that because yeah, when you have a big, gigantic thing swaying on the highway, like a lot of times, you're going to put a lot of wear and tear on your house, which is why people
Okay.
that move a lot, RVs or like fifth wheels are good options, or like schoolies, but or like those 20-foot tiny houses, which all power to anyone that could live in one of those. Because I toured one of those. Oh, Lord, couldn't be me. But 20 to 24 is good for movement. 26 and above, depending on your building material, it might get a bit more difficult.
Hmm. I can
Just
see where
to
that would be the case because it's huge. Like I think
massive.
like people don't realize that because I think like, oh, it's only like, it's 300 square feet or it's less than 300 square feet, but that's still a lot of square footage. It's a studio apartment in some places. Like so you can imagine putting your studio apartment on a trailer and then driving it somewhere regularly. Like that's a lot to do. So it's still heavy and it's a lot of space. So I think that
Yeah,
that's a
you'll
good
need
point to
a
bring
truck.
up.
You need a
Yeah.
big truck to move it, or you have to pay. I paid, let's see, to move it 60 miles, I paid like $900.
Oh, 60.
That's a
That's
lot.
less than 100 miles.
Yeah, well, it's a specialized,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah, it is.
specialized
Special
industry.
load.
So
Yeah.
you get what you get.
Hmm.
And they don't even set it up for you. That was without
Oh,
setup. So
I
those are
didn't know
things
that.
to
Okay.
think about. Yeah.
Hmm.
But other than that, like, they're super fun. If you get your own big truck and you move it, then you can have the time of your life.
I know you talk a lot
Sorry.
a lot on your channel about being a single mom. That's like really important to you. Like, do you have any advice for anyone out there that's also a single mom or a single parent that's thinking like, I want to go tiny, I want to go like downsize so that I can like, maybe spend more time with my kid because my overhead costs will be lower. Like, do you have any advice for them? Like, what, based on your experience?
I totally recommend that anyone does it,
Hmm.
because it enabled me to be able to stay home with my daughter for like 2 ish years. Um, but if you're going to do that, definitely, especially if your kids are like older, like when they're younger than 4, it's pretty easy to like keep them entertained in the house. But older, definitely make sure you're getting out a lot
Hmm.
and using a lot of outdoor space. That was my biggest problem. I wasn't using outdoor space enough. But my tiny house was like 10 feet away from a concrete factory. So I didn't want to be out there, which was the problem. So, yes, outdoor space, I think, is going to be your best bet. And I don't think you have to be a minimalist to be tiny, but you definitely have to have no stuff because the more stuff you have, the more cluttered and the more just it feels smaller and more stressful all the time. And get a bath, for the love of God, get a bath. I didn't have a bath because I didn't think I was gonna have a kid. Worst, it was the worst trying to get her like a shower. So definitely do
I
that.
didn't think about that because most of them, when I see them like design wise, and I worked for a tiny house company for almost 6 months, and I did design for them, and like no one ever asked for a tub, and all the clients I worked with and all the ones I see, like no one ever asked for
Really?
one, and I don't really see too many with tubs, so I guess people don't really think about that, but I would totally want one because I like baths. I think baths are fun, but like if you have kids, for sure you're gonna need a tub. Otherwise, you're
Screw.
just trying to be brave and get it.
My sister has a tub in hers. It's very cute because she loves baths, that girl.
Hmm.
So yeah, she got a tub in hers. And you can get them pretty good size, but yeah, if you have kids, get a tub. Don't stress yourself out. And compost toilets, love them. They're very stressful with kids, especially when kids like to grab things.
Ooh, I
So
didn't think
if
about
you
that.
I wasn't a very good like, like I watched her, but not too good. So, that's my let me see if I have any other advice. It's been so long since I've had to think about this. Yeah, I think that's it. Get outside, get a bathtub, and get a regular size fridge. Don't do that mini fridge
Okay.
stuff.
Yeah.
You'll run
That's
out
a
of
good
food.
point. Yeah, because then you have to worry about how much food you bring in when you go to the store, and that's could be
Mm.
a bit of a pain. So yeah,
And
standard
most
size fridge makes sense.
and most RV location, like RV parks and stuff, are not like right next to the grocery store.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that's my advice. If I
Makes
think of
sense.
more, I'll message you.
Cool.
Sorry.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I feel like you like in general it's just great to talk to you and get to know you and connect with you. But hearing about your experience and your journey is really amazing. It's incredible. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. And your Instagram and your YouTube are both This Tiny Journey. So there's links to both of those. They'll be
Oh
in
yeah.
the video description. So make sure that check you out and just continue to follow everything that you're doing and, make sure that we get to connect again too in the future. So thanks so much again. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This was very fun, and I have to
All right, so that was my conversation with Alexis. They said so much really useful information. I feel like they help sort of like remove the veil a little bit on sort of like the reality of being a tiny house dweller. It's sort of like the transition to being a tiny house dweller and owner, and then out of a tiny house as well, which is a really unique perspective. I think it's super important to have. So hopefully it answers some of your questions that you have for those of you at every stage that you might be at on your tiny house journey. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and please do take the time to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you find out when I drop new videos. We drop new videos every week. And in the next video, I'm going to talk to a tiny house company owner. So just hear a little bit about their experience. So you don't want to miss that one. So again, thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to think tiny. See you all later.